What's up, guys? So, I wanted to address something that's been on my mind recently. Uh, as regulars to my channel know, I am a musician and a writer, and consequently, I will have people, understandably, who reach out to me for advice on their art, their creations in those fields, those areas. And with literary works, I'm not willing to give critique because, unfortunately, that gets into a whole realm of politics within publishing known as accepting unsolicited material. And so I'm just not going to critique your story, your manuscript, that kind of thing. But sometimes people will send me music that they've made that they want some advice on. And, to a limited extent, I'm happy to give them my thoughts. The thing is with that, a lot of times what happens is I, politely offer my critique, and then the next day my inbox is full of another 30 some odd tracks that they want me to critique. And at that point I have to be like, okay, look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is what I do professionally, so I would have to charge you to go through and listen to all of this and give you my critiques of it and everything. And that's understandable, though. I appreciate the enthusiasm with which people, come to me with things they've created and that kind of thing. More recently, something has started happening that I need to kind of universally address. And if you recognize yourself in anything I'm saying, understand that this is actually an amalgamation of multiple exchanges I've had with multiple people. And I need to just universally explain this, where I stand on this out front. Now, as regulars to my channel also know, in 2022, I started teaching myself how to program because I wanted to learn how to make games in Adventure Game Studio. And to accomplish that goal, I started using visual assets that were made using a combination of Midjourney and ChatGPT with certain 3D objects done in Meshi. And I didn't have a problem with doing that personally, just because it was first and foremost an educational opportunity for me. And I'm certainly not holding myself out as a graphics artist or anything. I'm still working on the game, and if I decide to release the game, it's going to have a disclaimer at the beginning that says, I can't take any credit for how this game looks. It was all the visuals were generated with AI, and if you are an artist who sees a strong reflection of your art in my my game that I'm putting out here, please contact me, because I'd at least like to find a way to try to credit you where it's appropriate. That's what I'm thinking. But I've been back and forth a lot on the morality of all of this as we're entering the AI era, unfortunately. And it seems like people are generally okay with AI-generated assets in computer and video games and that kind of thing. And I think the logic behind that is that, game design is an art design by committee project in general, and for small-time independent developers where one person is trying to collapse all of the responsibilities for the creation of the project into, 1, 2, 3 people at the most, you're having to find ways to compensate for the people that you don't have voluntarily collaborating with you on the project. For monetary reasons, you have to find workarounds, the most common of which in video games is to just download packs of pre-rendered assets. You need chairs and beds and couches for your apartment scene. There's, people on Itch.io and other services like that are happy to give you pre-rendered assets to use. And for generic stuff like that, like apartment furniture, it's not, it's a perfectly reasonable way to go. And there's games like Getting Over It by Bennett Foddy that use entirely pre-rendered visual assets in the game, and that was actually part of his like artistic statement that he wanted to make. So then we get into murkier waters, and this is where I question the, in and of itself, I don't have a problem with the use of visual assets, of AI generated visual assets in my game, because I'm honest about what I'm doing. I'm not trying to give myself credit as a graphics artist for those images. Now, I have created my own graphics, graphical images in the past that were, amateur attempts at digital airbrushing or amateur attempts at photo collage and things like that, just my own experiments. But as far as the visual assets in the game, I'm not taking credit for that. I would never call myself a creator of those images. At best, you could say I commissioned them. And I bring all of this up because what I've encountered recently on a few different occasions is people reaching out wanting to share with me music that was created using AI, wanting to say, look at this music, look at this music that they created. And it puts me in a really awkward spot because these are people that I don't have any animosity towards, people that I generally like in most cases. And you're putting me in a position where I have to come back to you and say, I can't give you any critique about this. I don't have any opinion about this as a professional musician because there's no nurturing component to it. There's no mentoring aspect to this. It's just, it's just, what do I think of this thing that was generated using generative AI? And most of the time, the best I can say is, okay. But the problem is, what happens is, if I start arguing with people about this, the same kind of rubric of principled disagreement starts to arise. And it is just not fair to call yourself a musician because of art that you generated with using AI. I mean, any more than, there are people who try to credit themselves in ways that they don't deserve in all art forms, all mediums. Rick Rubin pointed out in I'm pointing to it because it's on the shelf over there, his book, The Creative Act, that, Andy Warhol commissioned those paintings of food cans and tomato sauce cans and that kind of thing, that he commissioned those, but they're still considered Warhol paintings and that sort of thing. And more recently, Tommy Tallarico tried to give himself credit for a lot of other people's music by trying to argue that his contribution as producer was so great that he should somehow be able to give himself sole credit for the creation of it. And we know that that's not morally acceptable when there's a direct, specific person like that that's being screwed out of the credit and screwed out of the honor that they deserve. And I think a lot of my well-intentioned friends and associates who do this, what happens, it's the same thing we saw with Napster and LimeWire and all of that, where a technology emerges that allows people to cheat, and they start cheating before they realize that they've cheated. And once you bring it to their attention that what they're doing is cheating, they start trying to prevaricate like mad and obfuscate the issue. And in the case of, it always goes down some very predictable avenues. In the case of file sharing, and I was at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, hearing this from my fellow students who couldn't understand why I was so incensed by it. But they would say things like, "Oh, well, I just want to make sure that I'm going to enjoy it before I buy it." Or, "Come on, man, all that money goes to the corporations anyway. The artist barely sees any of it. It's power to the people, man. Yeah, and all this populist rhetoric and everything that I'm sure you really believe in. Yeah, right. And the thing is, I would at least be able to tolerate what you're doing if you could just admit that you're downloading music you didn't pay for, that you have no right to download, and you're ripping people off. You're ripping people off. You're pirating the money, the music, and you're ripping people off. If you could at least be honest about that, I wouldn't agree with what you're doing, but I could at least live with it. But instead, people start trying to eat their cake and have it too. And by the way, it is eat your cake and have it too, not have your cake and eat it too. You can have your cake, have it, and then eat it as well. You cannot eat your cake and then still have it. Anyway, also it's couldn't care less, not could care less. Okay? Oh, and one more thing while we're clearing the air on cliches that are said incorrectly. The one thing I can't stand is nobody talks about this one, and it needs to be addressed. It's when someone's addressing an age discrepancy between two characters or between two people, and they say, "You're old enough to be my son," or something like that. It's like, no. You're young enough to be my son. If you are addressing the youth of another person relative to your own, you are young enough, I am old enough. Get it right. Anyway, because technically, if you're older than the age of, if you are old enough to procreate, then literally anybody who is born the nanosecond they're born at that point is old enough to be your child. But anyway, bringing it back to the thing of AI. Look, the thing now, just like we heard all the stuff about, oh yeah, we're sticking it to the corporations. I want to make sure I'm going to like it before I buy it. All of that, and you just have to hold their hand. And like you're just holding the hand of a child and explaining, okay, the artist who made this put it out into the world on this physical format and sent that physical format to stores that give you the physical item in exchange for monetary compensation. And that is how they wish for you to indulge in their product. And when you don't give them that money, when you don't engage that exchange of monetary compensation for the physical media they wanted you to purchase in order to listen to their music, you're stealing from them. And one of the funniest ways in which the rampant excuse making devolves into nonsense is if you've seen the short-lived live action Trey Parker, Matt Stone sitcom That's My Bush, which is like a kind of Flintstones, Amos and Andy level sitcom, but about the George W. Bush. There's one where it's making fun of the file sharing debate and the way people tie themselves in knots trying to justify what they're doing, where he's stealing cable and he starts offering Laura Bush these like really bad excuses that it starts out something about sharing a pack of gum or something, and by the end he's like, okay, it's like we're all standing in a giant mouth and we're chewing gum together. It just becomes complete nonsense. Anyway, so bringing that around, by the way, to the makers of Olipop, your classic root beer flavor is like, this has gotten me through some very rough times recently. I would like an endorsement deal for this with like multiple cases of your product shipped to my home for free. Just throwing it out there. I will gladly plug your product. Anyway, but bringing it around to the AI thing, look, when you go to Suno or any of these things and you say, make me this type of song, and you come to me and you say, look at this thing I created, look at this thing I made. What you're saying to me, what you're in effect doing is going to a 5-star chef and saying, I ordered this food from McDonald's. Aren't I a chef just like you? No. No. You're not going to sell me on the steamed hams routine. No. I cannot legally tell you what to do. I'm not, and if you want to do this, I can't stop you. If I could, I would, believe it or not. But what happens is, I tell people, you're not creating anything. You haven't created anything when you made it with Suno or any of these other AI apps. And usually people will come back and they'll try to tell me, oh, well, it was really hard. I had to do all of this, that, and the other stuff to make it happen. And I had to do this thing and this thing and this thing. And then it came back with this, and I had to tell it no and talk back and forth to it to tell it what I wanted and everything. You didn't create the music any more than Tommy Tallarico trying to give himself sole composer credit for music on which he was only in the studio as producer. That's as far as it goes. You can call yourself a producer, but you are not a musician, you are not a composer at all if you went to an AI and said, spit out this thing for me. Just like the visual assets for my game do not make me any kind of visual artist. I can't take any credit. My game is like a first-person point-and-click game like Return to Zork and Myst and Seventh Guest and all of that, and people say, oh, the graphics are beautiful, and I always say, I can't take any credit for it. It's all AI. I have, by the way, an idea for a future game that I'd like to do, or what I could do. I know how to do 3D design in Cube 2 Sauerbraten, which is an FPS design tool. And what I've experimented with is taking screen caps from that and polishing them in ChatGPT or something like that. Or I may just leave them as is. But, doing something like that, at least I can say, yes, I contributed to the design here, and then did all the lighting, took it into ChatGPT for the lighting and shading. You can start to take some credit for the things you've actually done. But even then, I would never take that and go to an artist whose work I respected and say, look what I did with AI. Like, dude, you have no idea. You have no idea how disrespectful that is. Today, I bring this up because I was having this conversation with someone today, and dude, please, you don't need to write me like a 90-paragraph comment. I'm not attacking you. I'm not identifying you at all. But was talking to me about this and talking to me about AI-generated music, while I happened to be sitting here on the couch doing my daily guitar practice. And I did, for my jazz practice, Autumn Leaves and Autumn Leaves, Take the A Train, Giant Steps, and then for my metal practice, I did Master of Puppets, which I actually seriously needed to brush up on. I did those things because, when I was 13, I decided, so 29 years ago, I decided that, wait, did I get that math right? I'm 42. Anyway, I decided when I was 13 that I wanted, I discovered the guitar, and I decided I have to devote my life to this thing and to the arts in general. The imagination, my gift is my imagination. My two gifts are my imagination and my determination, my willingness to sit and practice a craft and hone it that I'm passionate about, and hone it until I've got it. I devoted my life to these things. Quite frankly, I made a lot of sacrifices for these things. It would be a lot easier for me. I am now 42, and I am single. I have no kids that I know of. And I don't make nearly as much money as a lot of people my age, especially, let's be honest, a lot of men my age would normally be making. I'm way behind in a lot of areas, but it was a trade-off that I made so that I could devote my life to things that I care about, and this thing that is more important to me than anything else in the world, which is music and writing and the craft of these things. And you come along having pushed a button or several buttons and are wanting to now sit at the cool kids table. And that's the thing. And what happens is the same thing. I come back to the same thing over and over again when I confront people with this. Whether they are friendly people or hostile people, they say the same thing, which is, well, why can't I just do my method and you do your method? Because my method is going out to the cattle pasture, whacking the cow over the head with a club, checking its pulse to make sure it's dead, dragging it, dismembering it, dragging its body parts back to the slaughterhouse, cutting off all of the meat from all of the different areas, processing it, sterilizing it, cleaning it, shaping it into a patty, taking it out, putting it on my grill, flipping it, seasoning it with the Worcestershire sauce and the Dash's beef seasoning and all of that, and flipping until it's just perfectly done, and putting it on a bun with cheese and lettuce and tomato and ketchup, and putting the top piece of the bun on there, putting it on a plate, and saying to someone, "Here, I made this for you." And your method is going to the drive-thru at McDonald's and saying, "Cheeseburger, please." And you're and now you're gonna come back to me and say, "Oh, but my order was really complicated. I ordered something that wasn't on the menu, and I had to write it down first. And I talked back and forth to the speaker box for like 5 minutes before they really understood what I wanted." Great. Your order was more complicated than normal. You're not a chef. And that's the thing. If there is a page on Facebook, and by the way, don't send me friend requests if you just know me from YouTube. I don't approve them. But there is a Facebook forum that I follow called Sierra AI Arts. And we who are on this forum, we go to ChatGPT and Midjourney and all the different AI art apps out there, and we take screenshots from old Sierra games, like the early Space Quest games, that kind of thing, and we give the various AIs prompts like, make this look like it would look in a David Lynch movie or an Andrei Tarkovsky movie or something. And it's like, look what we did. This is cool. This is neat. Nobody is under any pretense in that. It's just fun to do. We're just entertaining each other. Nobody's under any pretense that we're actual art creators. It's just like mainly just wanting to imagine what classic Space Quest and Leisure Suit Larry and all of that would look like as movies, and that's fun. We're just entertaining each other. But then I'm on these forums that are supposed to be like forums for writers to connect and talk about the craft of writing and talk about career advice about publishers and agents and that kind of thing, and more experienced writers can mentor new and upcoming writers. And I have unfollowed so many of these things because every fucking one of them now is just one person after another posting that they just generated their manuscript with ChatGPT, and how do we have any suggestions on getting a publisher? Good Lord. The pipeline to getting published is already clogged with endless manuscripts written by people who actually put in the time to actually create something, who actually deserve the accomplishment. Lance Armstrong had to renounce a great deal of his success. Lance Armstrong had to renounce a great deal of his successes because it was revealed that he used performance-enhancing drugs. But even then, he actually completed the races in question, just with the help of performance-enhancing drugs. What you're doing is at the level of sending having an android that you didn't build get on a bicycle and win the race for you and calling yourself a professional athlete. And you're going to tell me, oh, but I had to talk to the android a lot. I mean, I really had to talk to it a lot so it understood what I wanted it to do. You still didn't do it. You're still giving yourself the title that you don't deserve. You're still Tommy Tallarico. The Tommy Tallarico thing I keep coming back to. Okay, for years and years, people would come to me, and, when people would ask me, what's your favorite video game soundtrack? The first one that would come to mind was the soundtrack for Terminator for Sega CD. And the music is still incredible, regardless of who wrote it. It's still phenomenal music, don't get me wrong. But I would talk about what a badass composer I thought Tommy Tallarico was. Then it comes out that, that was just another one of those things where it was actually this person over here and Tommy was just in the room. And Tommy's trying to finagle it into giving himself composer credit for something, because he was in the room working the mixing console or something. And again, and it's even more, that's even more aggravating because there is music that Tommy Tallarico actually did write, and so now it's like impossible to take him at his word when he says he did write this when we know he's, But anyway, it's that. It's just that. It's not another way of doing it. And the same thing comes back. I get the same thing over and over again from people, which is, it's just another way of doing it. It's just another method. You do your way, I'll do my way. My way is actually doing it. Your way is cheating. And, you want me to take account for it. I'm not, with the art I'm designing, the art I'm using in my game, I almost said designing, the art that I'm using for my game, I'm not claiming any credit for it. But I'm not going to, I'm happy to sit here and tell you this is what it is. I don't deserve any credit for it. It doesn't make me a visual artist. I would never go to, since there's all of this industrial futurism and the look of the game, I would never take that and go to H.R. Geiger and waste his time with, look what I did. Anyway, I'm getting carried away and I wanted this to be a little more conciliatory. But it's not. We are not. Just over and over again. It's that, why can't you use your method and I use mine? I want to show you your method. So I opened ChatGPT and I said, I'm thinking of doing a YouTube video on the abilities of artificial intelligence to generate literary works. If I asked you to write the first chapter of a Harlequin romance-style novel, could you do it? And it said,
yeah, sure thing. I can definitely do that. Just let me know any specific details or themes you want included, and I'll craft a chapter that fits the Harlequin romance style. Romance vibe, high emotional stakes, glamorous setting, magnetic leads, lots of longing.
Okay, so what happened there was I accidentally hit the voice chat thing, so it was now listening to what I said in real time and thinking that's what I wanted it, repeating the conversation we already had. Anyway, here was the original comment that it actually said. It actually gave in response to what I just read.
Yes, I can absolutely do that. A couple quick notes so you can frame it well for your video. I can write something that strongly matches the Harlequin romance vibe. High emotional stakes, glamorous setting, magnetic leads, lots of longing banter, clean but sensual tension. What I can't do is intentionally copy a specific copyrighted book's exact phrasing or a living author's distinctive voice. So I'll create an original chapter that feels like the genre without being a clone of any one title. If you want, I can tailor the chapter to whatever subflavor you're highlighting in your video. Billionaire, small town, doctor, medical, royal, secret baby, enemies to lovers, second chance, etc. But even without that, I can just pick one and write chapter 1. If you say go, I'll write chapter 1, about 2,000, 3,000 words, unless you want shorter, with a hooky opening, a meet cute, meet ugly, and the central emotional premise clearly established.
Okay, so I said, make it 800 words so it better fits inside the length of the video, and the story is about a sentient cyborg that lives alone on a private estate and falls in love with an anthropomorphic hyena that stops by one day to sell him earthquake insurance. That took me about as long to come up with as it did to read. Anyway.
Chapter 1. The last earthquake had come without drama. No screaming sirens, no panicked crowds. Just a quiet, invisible shove that traveled through bedrock and history alike, enough to rattle the cut crystal decanter in the drawing room and make the old portrait of Baron Vellum tilt half an inch to the left. It had been, by all measurable standards, insignificant. Yet Cassian Vale had felt it in the way a man with flesh and nerves might feel grief. His estate sat alone on a rise of dark pines and stubborn stone, a private kingdom fenced in by fog and money, and the kind of silence that was only purchased after everything else had been lost. The house itself was too large for one occupant, yet Cassian had always been too large for ordinary places. Too tall, too quiet, too constructed. He stood now at the north-facing windows, hands folded behind his back, watching a strip of sea-colored sky. The machinery along his spine idled with a soft internal hum, like distant thunder held politely in a cage. Sentient cyborg. The term had followed him through headlines and court proceedings and a brief, humiliating talk show circuit. He preferred simply Cassian. Outside, a car's engine approached along the gravel drive. Cassian's security network noticed it long before his eyes did. License plate, tire pressure, heartbeats inside the vehicle, the faint thermal signature of a paper folder on a passenger's lap. Someone had entered his perimeter. He didn't move toward the door. He never moved toward the door. Still, he found himself listening. The car stopped. A door opened. Footsteps came closer. Light, confident, a cadence that suggested humor and danger both. Then the bell chimed, a clean note that rang through the hall. Cassian waited exactly 5 seconds, because the last thing he would do was rush for anyone. When he opened the door, a gust of cold air cut in, carrying the scent of wet leaves and city asphalt. On the step stood a figure in a charcoal suit, a satchel strap crossing their chest, a rain-speckled folder held in one hand, and a hyena's face looked up at him. Anthropomorphic, standing upright, clothed, articulate, undeniably person, yet unmistakably hyena. Strong muzzle, dark eyes bright with mischief, ears alert beneath neatly combed fur. Their grin revealed sharp teeth that would have been alarming on someone less disarming. "Mr. Vale?" the hyena asked, voice smooth and warm as an expensive drink. "Cassian Vale of this," they added, gesturing broadly at the sprawling estate behind him. Monumental solitude? Cassian's sensors did something they weren't supposed to do. They spiked, then stuttered, as if his systems were momentarily uncertain what category to assign this visitor. "I don't do interviews," he said. The hyena blinked, unfazed. "That's all right. I'm not press." Their gaze flicked, not to the sleek metal at Cassian's wrists or the faint seam at his throat, but to his eyes, as if those were the only parts that mattered. Cassian hated how that made him feel. "Then you're lost," he said, because it was easier than asking what on earth an impeccably dressed hyena was doing at his door. "Not lost," the hyena replied, and stepped a fraction closer, as if the cold belonged to them and the boundary line didn't. "I'm selling earthquake insurance." Cassian stared. In another life, he might have laughed. In this one, laughter arrived as a memory of muscle and breath, a ghost movement somewhere behind his ribs. "I live on bedrock," he said flatly. "This place was built to withstand. Your place was built to withstand a lot of things," the hyena cut in, and there was a pointed softness to the words. "But the earth doesn't care what you paid for reinforced concrete." Cassian's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being interrupted, especially not by someone who looked at him like they could read the wiring behind his politeness. "I have engineers," he said. "I'm sure you do," the hyena said, smile widening. "And I'm sure your engineers are brilliant. But I'm not here to insult your architecture, Mr. Vale. I'm here to offer a product that protects what matters when the things you can control. Stop cooperating. Cassian's gaze sharpened. What matters? He repeated, voice low. The hyena's grin softened into something unexpectedly sincere. You. Silence filled the doorway like a held breath. Cassian didn't have a heartbeat in the traditional sense, but there were pumps, regulators, little mechanical insistences that simulated life. For a moment, he swore he could feel them stumble. The hyena cleared their throat, as if suddenly aware they'd stepped too close to something intimate. Sorry, that sounded more personal than I meant. I'm Rowan, by the way. Rowan Kestrel. They offered a hand, gloved and steady. Cassian looked at it. He hadn't touched anyone without purpose in a long time. Rowan didn't flinch when Cassian's metal fingers closed around theirs. Their grip was firm, warm through the glove, real in a way that made Cassian's internal temperature compensation kick up half a degree. Rowan Kestrel, Cassian repeated. Yes. Rowan's eyes gleamed. It's a good name. Memorable. My boss says it sells trust. I told him I don't sell trust. I sell practical safety. They leaned in, lowering their voice as though the hedges might be listening. But trust is the part people actually buy. Cassian released their hand. You should leave, he said, too quickly. Rowan's ears tilted back for half a second, surprise, maybe, or irritation. Then they recovered, smile returning like a practiced weapon. Ah, I see. You're the no visitors type. I'm the no surprises type, Cassian corrected. Rowan's gaze traveled over him. Not his metal, not his height, but the tension in his shoulders, the distance he maintained even while standing inches away. Then you must hate the fact that you opened the door. Cassian didn't answer. Rowan lifted the folder. Look, I can do the whole pitch out here in the cold, but my fur doesn't do well with damp, and you look like you'd rather endure a quake than small talk on your doorstep. Cassian's eyes narrowed. You presume a lot. I observe, Rowan said. And I'm good at it. Occupational hazard. They held up a single sheet inside the folder, a clean printed map of the region with fault lines marked in red. Cassian recognized the primary fault by name. He'd funded the research team that discovered its last shift. You've been studying my land, he said quietly. Rowan's expression sobered. I study risk. You just happen to live in a place with a fascinating relationship to it. Cassian felt something coil inside him, an old defensive instinct, sharpened by years of being watched and cataloged, his humanity debated like a stock price. Yet underneath it, something else moved, subtler and far more dangerous. Curiosity. What do you want? He asked. Rowan's grin returned, slower this time, a spark lit behind it. 10 minutes, a cup of coffee if you're feeling generous, and permission to explain why the ground beneath you isn't as stable as you think. Cassian hesitated. He could close the door. He should close the door. Instead, he stepped back. Rowan's eyes flicked up, delighted, and their tail, Cassian noticed, despite himself, made a small, satisfied sweep behind them. Fine, Cassian said, voice carefully neutral. 10 minutes? Rowan crossed the threshold, bringing the scent of rain and city lights into Cassian's quiet hall. As the door shut behind them, something inside Cassian, something that had nothing to do with circuits or armor plating, shifted, as if a fault line deep within him had just very gently begun to move.
Okay. You've probably figured out where I'm about to go with this, but watch this, and if somebody in the comments wants to timestamp to the point that I finish so you can skip ahead, that's fine, but watch this. Oh, and I would never have, I should have told it not to use they, them pronouns. I'm very sorry about that. I assumed we were not debating the gender of hyenas, or the binary gender capacity of hyenas. But anyway, so let's see here. We won't call them Rowan and Cassian this time. I put a finger to my mouth because I was stopping to think about character development in this totally ridiculous and inane thing I'm writing to make a point about the effort involved in creating art. I can't even be funny and ridiculous and dismissive without putting my heart and soul into it. Anyway, we're at 98 words. I just stopped to correct the spelling in this nonsense that I'm writing. Anyway, I'm taking this way more seriously than I thought I was going to. Okay, so it was 809 words, but I'm sure you'll take it anyway. Her breasts heaved against the steering wheel. Even the biomechanical spine enhancements had not been enough to take away the ache completely. I'm enough of an oddity already, she often lamented. Why must I have enormous knockers on top of it all? It was a sentiment that many of her kind shared. Some 50 years prior, a legion of basement-dwelling armchair genetic engineers had let their furry fixations get the better of them, and real-life human-animal hybrids had been the result. Now, a generation and a half later, many of her kind were the product of natural breeding between anthropomorph parents, but others like herself were still the product of hormonally drunken experimentation. Valencia, for that was her name, breathed in awkwardly as she disengaged the sprawling landscape of her cleavage from the steering wheel and laboriously climbed out of the mid-sized sedan. It wasn't enough that her creator, the one who touted himself on the internet as Captain Furfag 6969, had given her these hilarious parody bosoms. He'd also engineered her to have exactly one skill, the obsolete career path of door-to-door insurance sales. But all of that was only the daily hum of her usual aggravations. More immediate concerns awaited her attention, namely the lavish but heinously decrepit mansion that loomed before her. The design was that mid-century look that merged the palatial monarchistic visions of yesteryear with the slick, brutalist flair of post-psychedelic 1970s chic. Whatever statement such a hybrid design was supposed to make was muted by the ivy and moss that shrouded the structure and the kind of gloom and decay that only Mother Nature herself can bring forth. As Valencia approached the front gate, the sort of wrought iron nouveau affair that one normally associates with modern-day film adaptations of Great Expectations, she became aware that even that had been ensnared in this case by kudzu vines. Surely the place had been abandoned altogether. She checked her clipboard. No, this was definitely the place. The iron gate whined in its rusty tongue as she pushed it open, setting foot on the cobblestone path that led to the main entrance. As she quietly stepped down the way, she became aware of the trees that loomed over her like the towering archways of a long-abandoned cathedral. They were melancholic, yes, but they were organic, and that, at least, was a comforting bulwark against the moribund atmosphere that hung low in the air. She was aware of something at her throat, something not at all organic. Her mind identified the curvature of human muscle, of her neck falling into the crevice between that bicep and an equally pronounced forearm. But just as jarring was the absence of the soft grace that human muscle bore even at its most thoroughly developed. She realized in that instant that the muscles that gripped her throat were only for show, that whatever gave this creature its strength was born out of the cold steel grip of machinery, and it was a grip that held her in place much as she fought against it. "I am programmed to terminate all trespassers," said an authoritatively monotone voice. It had been precisely calibrated to land perfectly on the balance point between threatening and disinterested, between man and machine. I'm only here to sell insurance," Valencia whispered. "Ah, I am programmed to do something else altogether with salespeople." And in that moment, she felt something else that would normally have been organic and human rising up from the creature's waist. There was enough give in his mechanical grip that she could spin herself around, her cartoonishly large bust smashing into an armored torso. "Jesus Louises, lady," said the mechanical man, picking himself up off the ground. Annoyed as she was, Valencia was impressed with what she saw, and not just the equally absurd appendage that was now retracting into its abdominal storage cavity. He was well made, with a design that echoed the buzz-cut, hair and square-jawed countenance of military men of yesteryear. "So you do have a personality after all," she chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I do," he replied, picking grass off his chromium-plated pectoral muscles. "I'm Valencia," she said, extending a hand. "Percival the security droid," he replied, shaking her hand with surprising restraint. "So are you actually programmed to sexually assault salespeople?" "No, but after the 480th insurance-selling hyena that I ejected off the premises, I was starting to get creative. Figured you guys would fuck off if I got a little spicy with it." "Wait, are you saying that there's more than one insurance-selling hyena in these parts?" "More than one? I get like 20 a day sometimes. They're all created by my master, Captain Fag 6969, finished Valencia. "Oh, you know him?" "Yes, I do, and we have much to discuss." Okay. Neither what ChatGPT came up with or my little write-up there could be considered to have much in the way of literary or artistic value, but one of those things now makes me a writer of android furry romance fiction, and the other does not. And so I'm sorry, but I'm just I am just not, I will never buy into the idea that AI is just another way, another method, another way to do it. No. One is putting out the actual effort to get the results and giving yourself the title of creator in a given discipline because you have actually done the work that the kind of the work that puts you at that level of identification. And the other is pushing a button or a series of buttons and engaging a computer program to play a glorified game of Mad Libs and calling that your artistic achievement, your artistic creation. You know, my favorite author, Harlan Ellison, used to say, writing is easy, you just open a vein and bleed into the typewriter. And that's the thing. That's where, that's the thing. That is what is missing and what you will always be missing. And once you've actually done that, once you've actually climbed that mountain of artistic achievement and actually made something and done something of your own, and you actually know what pride of authorship is, you'll understand how utterly asinine it is to generate something with ChatGPT and then go bother writers on a forum about how to get a publisher for Drek that you didn't even create yourself. Look, there are people like, you know, there are established writers out there whose names are not, their names have gone, they've gone from being individual writers to their names being brands. I'm talking about James Patterson, Tom Clancy, R.L. Stine, you know, Mercedes Lackey. These are the people who make a career out of, they wrote the first few books themselves, and then as they started, raising supply to meet demand by taking outlines and handing them off to younger, less established writers. And in the cases where it's done honestly, they at least give co-author credit, like you'll see Mercedes Lackey and Ellen Guan or something like that. They at least give co-author credit. But that's why that kind of asinine behavior has taken off in the writing world. People want the title of author, the title of writer, without having actually done the work to do it, to actually accomplish something. And the same thing is happening now in the music world as well. So Mitzi is trying to tell me that it's wet food time, and I am going to go open a can of wet food and set it down next to her bowl and her litter box in the bathroom. And that does not make me a chef.